I went ahead and put the idler slash, well, I guess this is the tensioner assembly and the water pump pulley back on. There used to be an AC compressor over here, but we won't need that anyway. This truck doesn't have AC to begin with. And the alternator used to go right over here, but now it doesn't really fit. So our options are where the AC compressor used to be, which doesn't look like a whole lot of fun, or try and hang it up here off the front of the cylinder head where it's somewhat easy to get to and hopefully easier to build a bracket. I don't know. I'm not much of a fabricator myself. I mean, I have a torch and a welder and some saws, so I can make stuff happen, but it's probably not going to be the prettiest thing, which doesn't really bother me as long as it works. But yeah. So here's what I'm thinking. Let me know if you think I'm crazy, but the alternator that we had off of the car for this engine didn't appear to be working anyway because the battery light, charging light was on when I pulled the car in. And I have a couple of these GM alternators from LS Truck Motors. So my thought is, get hold of this here, and fab up some sort of a bracket. It looks like, let's see, eyeballing it just real close, somewhere in there. So I can hang this thing right about here. So there's not a ton of spots to bolt onto, but it looks like right here on the front of the head and right here on the front of the head there's some bolts. They're smaller, but there's a lot of them. I made a cardboard template of those. I'm going to transfer it to a piece of steel and run some flat stock out here. Then we'll probably use some angle iron to make a flat surface on top, and then another little piece of angle iron probably to the head over here and brace it over. Yeah, we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. It'll be some farmer engineering at its best, I think. But here we go. So obviously we'll have to cut this shorter, but before I cut it, I wanted to make sure that my hole's all lined up, just in case I made a mistake. So my thought is this guy will sit somewhere in this area. So that means we got to come out to roughly right there. We got a tape measure. Yeah, 12.5 should be enough. That'll keep it nice and tight. Should still be able to take the valve cover off if we need to. Alright, we're gonna run with it. My super high-tech workbench here. Mark that 12.5 like we were talking about. Little square across here. Give us a nice line to follow. There we go. Looks all right. Pretty mint. All right, so I cut a little 2-inch wide piece of 2-inch by 2-inch angle. My idea is that we'll drill some holes so that can bolt right there, and they should be on the same plane because they're right on the edge of the cylinder head. And then my idea from there is we'll just run some flat stock across the top. Well, we'll have to bring it out. I don't have a plate probably big enough. I'll have to look. Maybe I have some scrap that's big enough. But we'll basically run it across here and then bring it out. We might have to reinforce it underneath a little bit. But basically make a flat plate right here, and then we'll just put some tabs up for the alternator to bolt into. So I think it'll work. So I'm gonna make a little cardboard template here. should get us close. To do some custom something or other though, in order up there, the head of this bolt's obviously not going to fit in there because it's so close to the top. But I wanted it to be right on that plane with the head so it would match this. I got that one pretty darn close coming across. Figure do the same there. That should be fairly square. We'll see what happens. Alright, well, one of those holes is a little off from the rest, but we'll go see if it'll be close enough. As you can see, my first attempt failed miserably, so I just flipped the bracket around and re-drilled the holes. It's on there. I did end up having to hold it up 1/8 of an inch above the head surface there, which is not what I originally planned. So that means that this piece is going to be 1/8 low on that same plane. So I'll have to, we'll have to shim that up 1/8 when we bring our plate across, but it'll be okay. We'll get her. Here's what I'm thinking. I got this piece of angle iron here. I was gonna probably weld it in here as a support underneath. There'll be another piece of plate that goes over top of it that'll be on the same plane as this. And then I'll probably run another piece over here at an angle, just to shore everything up. But yeah. We'll tack that in there and we'll see what it looks like when we're done. So you can kind of see what I got going on here. So there'll be a set of ears here and a set of ears here, and then the alternator will bolt right on top of there. The alternator will end up sitting on there sort of like so. It'll have to come out. It'll be, you know, I don't know, I have to measure it, but it'll sit up in there somewhere, something like that. So plenty of room behind it, turbocharger things. Should have plenty of clearance for the hood. So this is where I'm gonna call it a night for today. We'll be back down here tomorrow to try and finish that up. So this is where we left off yesterday. So next step I'm gonna do, we're gonna build our brackets to hold the alternator on there. So what my thoughts are, I was just gonna take I think I've got, it's inch or inch and a half angle iron. I'm going to cut like little 1-inch pieces so that I put them here and here, and then those will stick up. We'll drill the holes in them, and then the alternator can bolt across into them from there. You can kind of see what I'm going for here. These are a couple little pieces I whipped up last night, and they're just 1-inch angle iron. Problem is they don't hold off the alternator far enough to clear the rest of the bracket. So we're going to add another 1/2 inch by using a taller piece of metal here. So we got to go ahead and mark our holes there. We'll drill all 4 of them, but those will be our ears for the bracket. So once you get your first hole drilled, what I like to do to make sure things transfer over if you're repeating it, so I'll just clamp the 2 together like this and drill the hole with the 2 clamped together, so that way they're the same. And then you're probably wondering, how does he keep it from tilting? Well, I just set the bar of the same material we're at in there, and the drill press will pressure it right in there. I hold it with the vice grip. It actually works pretty good. So here I'll show you. And then there, just like that, you'll have 2 identical pieces. Works for me. After drilling the holes, I went and rounded the edges off so they're smooth, but the main reason to do that is because otherwise it'll contact the housing of the alternator. And we want to be able to have these turned at just about a 90-degree angle, so that way, you know, it'll sit straight up and down like that. So now we got those. We'll fit them to the alternator. I think I'll probably have to trim them down a little bit. I think they're going to be too wide to space apart there, but give me a few minutes here and we'll see. So just as I suspected, they overlap, so we'll have to go ahead and trim them back, or at least 2 of them back, so that way these can sit flush on each other. Because if everything works the way it is in my head, we should be able to put these butt to butt and set them right on top of the bracket so far that we've already made, and just weld them in place. Okay, it's just sitting there right now, but you can get the idea. That's what we're going for a semi-end result. I gotta get a flat edge. I think what I'm gonna do is clamp a flat edge onto that water pump pulley, and run that up and use that to line up this pulley. But yeah, I think that'll work. The only other thing would be, hopefully, oh, come on now. I mean, obviously this won't be the belt that we'll use, but ooh, it's gonna be close. I think the radiator hose will fit underneath there, but if not, we'll have to rig up some sort of an idler. All right, so I didn't quite like how the alternator was sitting on there before. It was awful tight to the bottom where our plate is on the bracket there, so I added a little 3/16 piece there as a shim. So now we have clearance under the alternator. But basically it's gonna sit on there something like this. Let me get you attached and see where you're at here. I've got a piece of angle iron as a straight edge attached to the water pump pulley. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line it right up off of there. I'm going to line it up right off of there, and we're going to tack her on, and hopefully that works. We're going to find out. I did change my idea a little bit. I put a washer in each side of the bracket here, so that way I can change the location of those washers, and I'll have a little bit of adjustment in and out. But yeah, I mean, it should, that pulley lines right up with the edge of the angle iron here without too much. I mean, it's flush, so I think this will work. So that's tacked on there now. I don't know if you can see it, but using my angle iron as a guide there, I think we got her. And like I said, with those washers there, I can move the washers back and forth. And if I need to move it in and out just a hair, I can. But the way we built the bracket, it should be square to the front of the engine. And this should help confirm that. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully the belt doesn't squeak all the time. Worst case scenario, once it's started, I don't even need the alternator or the battery to get where I'm going because it's an old diesel. So I don't know. It'll be fine. That's that. You can see my terrible welds, but they should hold. It's definitely hot. I think I might run a bracket from here down to the block down there or something, just at a diagonal. If I do that, I think I'll probably will, but we'll do that. I'll probably do it where I can unbolt it up top here. So if I ever have to get in here and do a water pump, I don't necessarily have to take the alternator bracket off to get in here. So here's what I came up with. There's a bolt down here that goes through the timing case cover that used to hold the old original alternator bracket on. So I'm going to use that bolt, which is here, with a couple washers on it, because this isn't quite as thick as the aluminum bracket was. So that'll bolt right down there. And then I'll nut and bolt it right up here. Like I was saying, we'll connect it up on this end with a nut and a bolt. All right, and it'll be just like that. Our bracket is complete. Go ahead and get the, I think it's cooled off enough now. We'll go ahead and get the alternator put back on there, and we'll see if we can measure up a belt for it. All right, I did make slight modification. Grab it here. I angled that corner off of there, and then I went around with a die grinder and hit all the corners and just took the edges off of them. Because I plan on, well, I expect to be working on this thing quite a bit, and there's nothing worse than pulling an arm out, getting a big gouge from a sharp piece of metal. So I went ahead and did that. So we'll go ahead, we'll get the alternator put back on there. Well, my tolerances are tight, but that's probably a good thing. And those bolts I used are actually the stock GM alternator bolts. I could probably find some that are a little shorter, but we'll see. Let's see here. Our straight edge still lines up, so we can take that off of there now. Just set that to the side. But yeah, we'll get a belt on there. We should be ready to rock and roll. So in my never-ending quest to try and make this better, I was looking at this, and this seems like a pretty long stretch across the top here. So I'm thinking maybe it'd be better if I put an idler in here somewhere probably around there, and that would bring the belt below the radiator hose, which is good for a couple of reasons. But this way, if you needed to take the belt off, you wouldn't have to take the radiator hose off, because if it goes above the radiator hose, that means the hose would be in the middle of the belt. So between that and the fact that this just seems like a really long stretch for the belt, that I'm afraid it might overwhelm the tensioner, we're gonna try and put an idler like right about there. All right, so I drilled that hole basically so that way the bolt can't bottom out in the bracket. But I think what I'm going to do is I'll weld a nut on here, and then that's what we'll bolt our idler to, and then we'll just have to figure out the spacing. Yeah, so here's my thoughts. That should nut right in there. Well, actually, we might need 2 nuts to get our spacing correct, but something like that probably be pretty close. It's gonna have to come off the engine quite a ways, but I think we can make something work. All right, I'm gonna grab a smaller bolt to hold that all up in there, and we'll get the welder fired up. So just hold that in there square. I should be able to tack it on both sides, and then we'll finish weld it. The bolt being in there should A, allow me to hold it on there without burning my fingers, and B, keep the threads. We'll let that cool down. And we might have to run a tap through it to clean the threads, but we'll see. Hopefully that bolt will hold everything together nice. Usually they do. I'm gonna put a little bit more right here. If nothing else, it'll make me feel better. All right, now this is cooled off a little bit. We'll pull this bolt out. And then I stole an idler off of a 6-liter that I got sitting over in the corner here, which is where I stole the alternator bolts from too, but we'll spin that in there real quick. And we'll have to put some washers or whatnot behind there because it's not actually tight, but that's as far as the bolt will go in before it bottoms out on the cylinder head. But eyeballing it, that looks like it's pretty close to where it will need to be. Oop. Flip that around. I don't know, can you see? We might back you guys up a little bit. See if you can see the whole... Yeah, you can pretty much see the whole thing and what we got going on here. But anyway, yeah, I kind of like using, I wanted to use an LS style alternator just because I know if that goes bad and I'm on the road, I can get one just about anywhere. Whereas the factory Mercedes alternator is kind of hard to find. And actually it looks like, I guess we'd have to run it to see for sure. But if that's in or out where it needs to be, it looks pretty good right there. We'll probably test it out in that general area. Needs to be about 1 inch shorter, I think. But yeah, so I'll have to get a belt and we'll put some washers in there. But that looks pretty close. We can grab our angle iron here again and see where we're at. That's gonna actually, like, eyeballing it, that needs to come out just a little bit. That's straight with the belt. So we will make a spacer or find something to take up that little bit of space. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. But yeah, we got that much thread sticking out yet. And that's about where the belt would ride if it was where it's at right now, which was, we know, good because it would roll off the front of the pulley. So it needs to come out probably another 1/4 inch on top of that, which this bolt's plenty long enough. We should be fine. But we'll space that out and we'll see what happens. So anyway, last night I finished off. I ended up welding a piece of tubing over my stacked nuts. One, it looks way better, and two, I figured it'd be just a little bit stronger. So I ended up getting it in there where I do have one washer on there as a spacer, but we got it all lined up pretty good here. I hooked up the fuel lines kind of temporarily from the tank and there's a few gallons of diesel fuel in there, so we can go ahead and start it here quick, and you can see what we got for the belt here. So hang on, I got to do some wizardry with a battery and some jumper cables. All right, fire in the hole. So you can see the belt actually rides on there pretty good. I still need to get a little bit shorter belt, but yeah, that's that. Grab our shut-off lever here. So I think that's gonna work. I'm pretty excited about it. Like I said, I'm not much of a fabricator, and it may not be the prettiest thing, but I think it'll do. We'll find out. So if you see me on the side of the road somewhere and my alternator's laying on the ground, you can laugh at me. Well, I think that's gonna about do it for this chapter of the saga. I'm pretty excited that that alternator mount worked. I got quite a bit of time in it, almost the entire day. But I think it's gonna work, and then that should give me the availability of parts if it fails on the road. And it puts out about twice as much power as the stock alternator did. So all in all, I think it's an upgrade. Next episode of this, we're probably gonna try and get the front clip on here so we can get a battery installed, start doing some wiring. I gotta get a radiator in, figure out what we're gonna do for radiator hoses, figure out what we're gonna do for power steering hoses, figure out what we're gonna do for intercooler piping. Yeah, there's not much left. It's almost ready to drive. Still no glass in it. Gotta get the bed shortened up, make sure the lights and stuff work at some point. We don't really need those. So anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate you guys a whole bunch. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all them fun things, and we'll see you next time.